In the early 2000s, one of America's biggest, most respected companies just vanished. And I don't mean a slow, gradual decline. I'm talking about a catastrophic collapse that exposed an $11 billion lie at its very heart. This is the story of WorldCom. It's an incredible tale of ambition, deception, and the fallout that literally changed the rules for corporate America forever.
So, how does that even happen? How does a titan of industry, a darling of Wall Street, just disappear into thin air? Well, that's the mystery we're going to unravel today. The answer involves a CEO who used to be a basketball coach, a surprisingly simple accounting trick, and the incredible courage of one woman who just decided to start asking questions. Let's dive in. All right, so our story kicks off with a company that was on an absolute rocket ship to the top. WorldCom started out as this small, long-distance provider, but it had these massive ambitions, driven mostly by its charismatic and incredibly aggressive CEO, a guy named Bernie Ebbers. What's just wild here is the sheer speed of their growth. Ebbers' strategy was brutally simple. Just buy everything. They just gobbled up competitor after competitor, and it all peaked with this monster $37 billion acquisition of MCI. I mean, that one move made them a household name, an industry giant. And of course, Wall Street just ate it up. Their stock price went through the roof. This quote right here, this really gets to the heart of the company's DNA. Under Bernie Ebbers, there was one rule that mattered more than anything else. You had to meet the quarterly earnings targets, no matter what. The pressure was just off the charts. Failing to deliver the numbers simply wasn't an option. And that kind of environment, well, it created the perfect breeding ground for some very, very creative accounting. So, how do you keep up this illusion of endless growth? Well, behind the curtain, the company's financials were basically becoming a work of fiction. To keep that stock price soaring, WorldCom started playing a really dangerous game. To understand the fraud, you really only need to know this one super basic accounting rule. Things like paying for repairs on your network or leasing phone lines, those are called operating expenses. They're the immediate, day-to-day costs of doing business, and you have to subtract them from your revenue right away. Pretty simple, right? Well, not at WorldCom. And this is the whole magic trick right here. It's insane. WorldCom took billions of dollars in these everyday costs, and with just a simple change in the books, they relabeled them as long-term investments or capital assets. It's like if you took your monthly power bill and instead of paying it, you called it an investment in home energy infrastructure that you could pay off over the next 20 years. In the short term, your personal profits look amazing, but in reality, all you're doing is hiding your costs. And they didn't just do this once. This wasn't some rounding error. When investigators finally unraveled the whole tangled mess, the total fraud added up to a staggering $11 billion. It was a lie on a scale that was just almost impossible to comprehend. So, an $11 billion fraud. How does something like that even get exposed? Well, it didn't start with the FBI or some Wall Street regulator. It started with one person deep inside the company who just noticed that something didn't quite add up. And that person was Cynthia Cooper. As the head of internal audit, her job was literally to check the books. And in a company culture that was all about loyalty and just hitting the numbers, Cooper was known for something else entirely, her integrity. She was meticulous, and she was about to put everything on the line for it. So, during a totally routine audit, Cooper and her team started seeing these red flags. Costs were being filed in really strange ways, and when they started to pull on that thread, they realized these weren't just a few mistakes. This was a pattern, a systematic, deliberate effort to hide expenses. I mean, can you imagine being in her position? This is an impossible spot to be in. Do you report what you found and challenge the very executives who run the company, probably destroying your career in a culture that punishes people who step out of line? Or do you just stay quiet? What would you do? Well, she chose to act. Cooper was afraid that if she went to her bosses, they'd interfere or even destroy the evidence. So she and her small team started working in secret, often late at night, piecing the whole puzzle together. And when they had undeniable proof, they skipped the chain of command and went straight to the company's board. It was an act of just incredible professional courage. The second Cooper presented her findings, the dominoes just started to fall, and they fell with a speed that was just breathtaking. The whole financial house of cards that had been propping up WorldCom for years was about to come crashing down. Just look at how fast this all unraveled. On June 25th, the company admits to the first $3.8 billion in fraud. The very next day, the stock is basically worthless. And then, less than a month later, the whole company files for bankruptcy. It wasn't a decline, it was an implosion.
The market's reaction was just brutal and instant. In 48 hours, billions of dollars in investor wealth just poof, evaporated. The company's stock went from being a solid blue-chip investment to being worth less than a dime. And we really have to remember the human toll here. This wasn't just about abstract numbers on a screen. Tens of thousands of employees lost their jobs. And so many people saw their life savings, their retirement funds, which were all tied up in companies' stock, get completely wiped out. Lives were just ruined overnight.
The collapse of WorldCom was so huge, so catastrophic, that it forced a major reckoning. Both Washington and Wall Street had to admit that the existing rules just weren't strong enough to stop this from happening again. Big change was on the way.
First things first, there was accountability. The CFO, a guy named Scott Sullivan, he cut a deal and cooperated with prosecutors. But the man at the top, CEO Bernie Ebbers, he was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The message was loud and clear. Executives at the top will be held responsible.
But this was way bigger than just a few bad apples. The WorldCom scandal laid bare these deep, systemic failures in how corporations were governed. So Congress responded with one of the most important pieces of corporate reform legislation in modern American history.
It's called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or SOX for short, and it basically rewrote the rulebook. Now CEOs have to personally sign off on financial reports. No more "I didn't know." It required much stronger internal checks and balances. And, so importantly, it created real legal protections for whistleblowers, for the next Cynthia Coopers. Pretty much every part of this law was a direct answer to something that went wrong at WorldCom.
So we have stronger rules now, for sure, all because of WorldCom. But the pressures that created the scandal in the first place, that relentless focus on hitting quarterly numbers, on making the stock price go up, 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 well, those pressures haven't gone anywhere. And it leaves us with a really critical question. Are the new rules enough to protect us from the next big one?